Now, out of the four sectors that together make up the entire macroeconomy, remember that it's the firms and only the firms that alone are responsible for making, or we say producing, goods and services. And the total output, or we can say the total GDP that these firms as a sector decide to produce in a country, is known as that country's aggregate supply. And the aggregate supply curve in turn shows us the amount of this total output, the amount of this aggregate supply that these firms wish to produce at each of the different possible price levels that may exist in the economy. So graphically, we have the same axis as we had when we constructed the aggregate demand curve. On the y-axis, we have the price level. On the x-axis, we have the total output. And this time, a curve that would show us the different price levels and the output that these firms want to produce at each of these different price levels. That is what is known as the country's aggregate supply curve. Now, whereas the analysis of aggregate demand was straightforward and it wasn't controversial, as far as aggregate supply curve is concerned, things are more controversial. Or I should say that there is a disagreement amongst economists as to how the aggregate supply of a country looks like. Now, there are two different schools of thoughts, two different groups of economists. On the one hand, we have what are known as monetarists or neoclassical economists, and on the other hand, we have what are known as the Keynesian economists. And the monetarists, or these neoclassicals, these are the economists who, as a principle, believe in the extreme efficiency and the extreme power of the free market economy to self-adjust and always get to a nice equilibrium, even at the macroeconomic level. And these monetarists, these neoclassicals, who believe in this extreme efficiency, extreme power of the self-correction of the macroeconomy, they suggest that we should think of the aggregate supply curve in terms of a short-run aggregate supply and then separately a long-run aggregate supply. Whereas these Keynesian economists, they are not so sure about the power of the economy to always self-adjust and always automatically get back to nice equilibriums. That is the main difference in the principal way in which they think about the macroeconomy. Now, Keynesians, to depict their view of this macroeconomy as not being self-adjusting, they come up with their own version of an aggregate supply curve, and these Keynesians, they don't differentiate between a short-run versus a long-run aggregate supply. They have just one simple aggregate, not very simple, but they have one aggregate supply curve with which they depict all of their insights and ideas. Now, what we are going to do now in this video is that we are first of all going to develop the monetarist version of the short-run aggregate supply curve, and we are also going to learn what are the factors that can shift the short-run aggregate supply. Now, to start that analysis, obviously, we first have to define the short run versus the long run. Now, the way monetarists differentiate between short and long run is that they say that short run is that time period during which at least some prices in the economy are sticky. Now remember, this is a very specific way of defining what a short run is. It has got nothing to do with the time period or length of time. So don't think in terms of the number of days or the number of months or years when you are thinking about macroeconomic short run versus long run. Short run is simply that amount of time, that period during which some prices are sticky, or we say some prices are inflexible. Now, sticky and inflexible in reference to what? Relative to what? Well, you see, the idea is that we have defined this price level as the average level of prices in the economy, as a certain average of all the different products prices that exist in the economy. And we assume, and the way we think about changes in these price levels is, for instance, let's say when price levels increase, the way we think about this increase in price level is that, generally everything in the economy is becoming more expensive. Maybe some things are becoming more expensive than others, but generally, overall, all the things, their prices are increasing. Now, obviously, not all the prices of all the different goods will adjust at the same time. So maybe when the price of petrol increases, maybe transportation costs will go up immediately, maybe the cost of electricity that uses that petrol will go up immediately, but maybe the cost of restaurant meals, it will take some time to catch up. So different products prices, they adjust and they change at different times, after different times, as these price levels, this average price in the economy starts to increase. Now, those prices that take a lot of time to adjust, we say, are sticky. They are inflexible. Now, a lot of prices can be sticky, a lot of prices can be inflexible, but as far as this monetarist version of this ADAS model is concerned, and as far as the scope of your A-level syllabus or first-year college economics syllabus is concerned, when we think about sticky prices, we are basically thinking about sticky wages. Wages, remember, is also, wage is a price, the price of labor. When you hire the resource of labor, you have to pay them something. You have to pay them a price, and that price is known as the wage that you have to pay that labor. And monetarists precisely define this short run by saying this and that is the time period during which wages are sticky and wages are inflexible. Meaning that when price levels increase and things start becoming more expensive in your country, wages don't catch up immediately. Just imagine going to your boss telling him that, things are becoming more expensive, there is more inflation, so please increase my wage. Now, your wage won't immediately change in line with those price levels because maybe your manager would tell you that, look, you are under a contract. There are usually at least annual wage contracts. So until and unless your contract expires, your wage won't catch up with, let's say, increasing price level or maybe perhaps a decreasing price level. And then similarly, you have labor unions that resist wage drops when price levels start falling. They may be able to resist for 2 months, for 2 years, for 4 years, as long as they can resist a fall in wage corresponding to decreasing price levels in the economy. We would say we are in the short run. Wages are sticky. They are not falling as prices of other things are falling. So labor unions can be a reason for sticky wages. Then you can think about minimum wage laws. Many countries have minimum wage laws, so price levels may start falling, things may start become less expensive, but as firms, you won't be able to reduce the wages of the people you hire because there are minimum wage laws in place in most of the countries. So there are more than one way in which you can think about why wages may be sticky for a certain period of time. But these reasons are not important. The purpose, the reason why I have spent a couple of minutes explaining you these 2-3 different ways in which you can think about why wages are sticky is to just reinforce the importance of this thing, sticky wages. It's a theoretical world, remember, and in this theoretical world, this concept is extremely important because, as I said, this is precisely how you define short run, the period of time when wages are inflexible and they don't change in response to changing price levels in the economy. Now, by same logic, the long run can be defined as that time period after which all the prices, including the wages, become unstuck and they adjust and they change in line with the changing price levels in the economy. So that is your short run versus long run. Now, let me add one more term here that you need to understand before I give you the shape and how this short run aggregate supply curve looks. Now, that term that I want you to know at this stage is country's potential output. Now, this can be sometimes confusing because by potential output or potential GDP, a lot of people would assume that what we mean is the maximum amount of GDP, which is sort of correct. But there is a subtle difference between the potential GDP and country's maximum possible GDP that it can produce, or maximum output and potential output. Well, maximum output, you see, or maximum GDP is when you would assume that your country is fully employing all the 4 resources of land, labor, capital, and enterprise and using them in the maximum possible way that they can use. That is, all the people, let's say, start working 20 out of 24 hours a day, and let's assume no machinery is left idle 24 hours a day. You use all the machines and all the labor and capital and all the resources you have, then you will be able to get to some maximum GDP. As opposed to this maximum GDP where you as a country, you go crazy and you start working and using all your resources 24 hours a day, we define potential GDP or potential output as the maximum sustainable level of GDP or maximum sustainable level of output. That is when you use all of your resources fully, but in a normal sustainable way, where maybe your machines and labor and your resources are working every day from 9 to 5. Now, the reason why this difference is important is because, as we will soon see, the idea that in the short run, the economy can produce beyond its potential. The economy can sort of, try to work very hard and move towards its maximum, but that maximum won't be sustainable. And another related idea that, let me get that out of the way at this stage before it starts disturbing us somewhere later, is the idea of full employment. So when the country is producing its potential output, its maximum sustainable output, we say there is going to be full employment of the 4 resources of land, labor, capital, and enterprise. But full employment, again, remember, does not mean that there is zero number of unemployed in the economy. Full employment means that there is unemployment, but only some amount of what we say natural unemployment. So at potential output, when the country has full employment, it means that there is some unemployment, but only equal to natural unemployment. Now, natural unemployment means that, look, even in the best of economies, even in the most busy of economies, there are always going to be some people who are temporarily out of job. Maybe they have just quit their previous job and they are on a gardening leave, so they are out of work for maybe 2 months. Then there are some other people who are employed in sectors that have seasonal fluctuations, such as tourism. So maybe it's an off season and therefore certain number of people are unemployed temporarily. So all of these sort of natural reasons why unemployment, some amount of unemployment may exist, we say that number of people, these sort of seasonally unemployed and people who are just sort of moving in between jobs and therefore they are temporarily unemployed, those number of people taken together make up the natural unemployment rate or the natural unemployment numbers. So those are few confusing things that you need to understand, and you'll see why they are important as we go on. Potential output, the maximum sustainable output that a country can produce. At this potential output, there is full employment, which doesn't mean zero unemployed, but it means that there is only small amount of natural unemployment in the economy. Now, once you know these things, let me now tell you the shape of the short-run aggregate supply curve.